particularly Scandies take an even bigger one. So it's something we should touch on, along with all other kinds of things as well. Anyway, we're live, everybody. We are live, folks. It's Brainfood Live on Air, episode 170, bringing it to you every Friday, no fail. I'm delighted to be having this conversation because guess what? The Brainfood virtual tour is back on. And we haven't done one of these shows, I think maybe for a year. So it's a disgrace. I do apologize. But I really enjoy doing these shows. And the reason why is because I think that it's very important to speak to local recruiters in local areas and learn from them how they're dealing with some of the universal challenges that we experience in recruiting, and how local conditions actually change the solutions that you may deploy to try and solve some of those problems. So we've been everywhere. We've been to India, we've been to China, we've been to Middle East, and today we're going to go do a virtual visit to the Nordic regions. So we're speaking to people from Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. Having failed, Chris, to identify an Icelandic recruiter, a Greenlander recruiter, and a Faroese Islander recruiter, which I'm sure they exist, but we couldn't find any. So, folks, if you're listening to this wherever you are, and you know a person that works in recruiting in any of those three countries, please do let me know. In fact, let them know that they're now formally invited to this show, and they should dial in. We want to speak to them. On that thread, Chris, we had I think Jacob Sten Madsen did a bit of search, didn't he, about Greenlander the population. So 70,000 people, I think, in Greenland. And according to him, there was like loads of jobs happening in their capital city, which presumably recruiting happens in those places, right? But is there a recruitment agency out in Greenland? I don't know. I mean, quite cool to find out, wouldn't it? So anyway, listen, let's get on with the show. Actually, no, we've got to do some sort of sound checks firstly before we go. So folks on Crowdcast, if you're watching this on the Crowdcast link, can you quickly just confirm whether you can hear me okay? Just make a comment in the chat there. Let me know whether the audio and visual is okay. We're also piping this out onto, I believe, my personal Facebook page. So a kind of change of scene. We're not going to company page. My personal Facebook page. You should be seeing this. If you're watching it from on LinkedIn, folks, can you just give me some sort of indication whether the audio is okay there? I'm going to quickly check on my phone whether that's the case. Just never know, Chris, you know. I mean, the live streaming, mate, you know, it's crazy. It's working. I think we've got 50 people watching it there. Amazing. Fantastic. And I think we're live on Twitter and Facebook as well. So that's all good. All right. Great. Anyway, welcome to Chris Payne. Great to see you, Chris. Thanks for coming in and helping with this Brainfood Live. We've got a change of scene, by the way. The review of the newsletter is now going to a show on Monday. So register on Brainfood Bake Fresh. That's Monday, 12:30 p.m. That's when we do that. Here, we're going to go straight into the conversation. Give the topic a little bit more room to breathe. And Christian, you're here to help us because you are a person that knows the Scandinavian market better than most. Tell us why that is and give us a little bit of a promo on Talentia.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Whether I know better than most is subjective, but I do my best. British recruiter, but been living in Copenhagen, Denmark for 12 years now. So been on both the client side and on the agency side. And a little push on my company and obviously wearing my t-shirt, right? I wear my brand everywhere. Talentia, we are a new RPO company based here in Copenhagen. Team of 10 recruiters and growing and recruiting across the Nordics and supplying RPO services, in-house embedded recruiters, full RPO.
There we go. And it's got a 3-stage model. You've got to pick and mix. You can choose how and which way you want to operate with Talentia. Chris, why don't you share the link to your company to the chat stream there? Make sure people can check it out if they need support in growing and scaling your company. Okay, let's get on with the show. Chris, I mean, I might as well ask you the question. The reason why I was quite keen to get you on, as well as Danny Crook, who's coming on in a second, is that sometimes it's really interesting to get the worldview of someone who is not a native, but has spent long enough in the country to get that sort of inside out, outsider in type of view, right? Because sometimes if you're living and growing in the same milieu, you've never been out, it's often difficult to observe the own habits of your culture because actually this is just normal to you. Like a fish can't ever see the water, right? But you've come into the country. Like, tell us a little bit about your experience about the sort of Danish business and Danish recruiting in particular? And what have you learned over time to become successful in this country, which wasn't initially your own?
Yeah, and I must admit, like I said, it's been 12 years since I've lived here, and I had to really recall and think back to the nuances and difference that I observed in my first few years here. I think I've really just immersed myself and just adapted, got used to it, right? So I had to really think about it and like speak to a few of my fellow recruiters and like, do you think it's this and is it that? And it's like, oh God, yeah, they are like that, aren't they? So yeah, it's just it's of course you need to adapt and you know, learn what works in a native country and what's the right approach to take. But in terms of the actual differences, of course, we're going to go into much detail with all the guests. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Can you pick out one thing that you thought was okay, like maybe a mistake you made early on? You thought, you know what, I keep making this mistake, I got to stop this. And then it actually, you know, you figured it out a little bit, and you know, in terms of behaviors or communication or whatnot.
I think, yeah, coming from UK, and I was, you know, certainly was a workaholic, right? And working all hours, trying to catch my hiring managers or candidates in their family time is a big no-go, right? Calling them at 5 p.m. and saying, I've got a great job. And they really didn't care. So just drop it until Monday, 9 a.m. That's an adjustment.
Right, that's it. That's the first bullet point, folks. The first bullet point is kind of a respect for work and sort of a separation between work and play, in the sense that your private time is respected more so than certainly UK, right? And definitely US. I think the US, I mean, I don't know how many US folks are watching this. Tom, I know you are, but the US will take calls and do calls at all kinds of times. It's crazy. And I actually feel quite guilty for inviting US friends sometimes onto Brainfood Live, because I know they're going to say yes, and I find out it's like 5 o'clock in the morning for them, and I feel terrible. But I think it's very different culturally in perhaps Denmark, certainly maybe the rest of Scandinavia. It's like, okay, this is actually time for family or time outside of work. I'm not taking the call, which in the US and UK kind of worldview, that would be considered to be rude. But to try and like outbound in or try and force that situation to happen, that's a critical recruiting mistake. You don't make that mistake if you're hiring in the Nordics. Bullet point number 1, folks. Okay, let's try and bring some of our guests onto screen. Now, we've got loads of guests to bring on, so I'm not sure whether it's actually possible to bring everyone on screen from a technical point of view. I'm going to give that a shot. If we can't, we're just going to do a rotation, okay? So let's bring on Nicholas. I think I saw him. Yes, he's there. By the way, Heidi Wassini can't join us today, so I'm afraid we've lost one of our guests, and that is because Heidi unfortunately had some family things to take care of. She apologizes, and will be back with us in due course. Okay, I'm gonna have to bring on Kati as well. Cool. All right. Oh, and I think Danny, I might have to wait to bring you on, Danny. I hope that's okay. Actually, no, I'm going to give it a shot. You should be able to get on. Let's have a look. Danny Crook, there he is. Boom. Let's bring him on. All right, cool. Let's do some introductions first of all. Let's do some introductions. So why don't we go here first with you, Nicholas? Who are you? What is you do, sir?
First of all, hi Hong. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this show. Really humbled and excited about today's show. I'm a recruiter, founder of Growth Recruitment Group, specialized in helping startup scale-ups and mature, rapid growing companies finding talent within sales and marketing. So that's the short story.
Cool. And you're based in Oslo, is that right?
Based in Oslo, correct. Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, cool. Let's go to you, Per. Who are you?
Well, my name is Per Schanberg. I've been recruiting in Sweden and the Nordics for quite some time. As of right now, I'm a founder of a to-be-announced company, still not ready to go live. So I'm sitting in my office, but I can't really tell you too much about what we're going to do.
Oh, it's too secret. It's so secret. In fact, it's like the IT guys have frozen, and before he says anything too confidential, I've actually got him off screen. I mean, how crazy is that? Okay, that's a problem, but I'll try and bring you back there. That's okay. Let's go to you, Kati. Kati, who are you? Can you quickly intro yourself?
Hi, so it's Kati Kitti, calling from Finland, and I'm the head of talent acquisition at Solita, which is a tech consultancy company. in the Nordics and in the Central Europe. And I have been here 8 years and grown the company from 300 up to 1.5 thousand IT consultants. So it's been a ride.
Great stuff. And I'm not sure whether you remember, Kati, but I think we met when I was it in Helsinki that we met? I can't remember. It was, wasn't it? Yeah. So very nice to see you again. Okay. And we have Danny Crook as well. Danny, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, Hung. So my name's Danny. I've been working in recruitment about 12 years from London, spent the last 7 years living and working here in Stockholm. Today, I'm working at a small educational technology company. We're called Cognity. We build a teaching and learning platform with interactive textbooks for schools all over the world. So super impactful stuff.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that. Per, I can see you. I'm going to try and get you back on in a second, okay? Let's do some general stuff first of all. So when we're doing these virtual tours, one of the things I want to try and navigate is, number one, we want to try and obviously avoid like big stereotyping and, broad brushing everything. But at the same time, we also want to be able to say things that are definitely true with caveats, right? Because we need to provide useful information to an audience that might be trying to, let's say, recruit for the first time in that country. Maybe they've relocated or thinking about relocating to those countries, and they want to know what it's like to actually operate as a recruiter in those places. Maybe they're a candidate that, is potentially applying for jobs in Scandinavian companies, and they want to be aware as to, the things to do and things not to do. Can we give like one like broad brush type of commentary about, let's say, Nordic culture that you think that other people outside of the Nordics are not usually aware of, but actually would be quite useful for them to know? In the same way that Chris was talking about, hey, calling people outside of the office hours in the traditional sense is generally counterproductive. Probably most people, certainly in the UK, would not know that. And you'd have to learn it the hard way. So are there anything else that you think you could introduce broadly that would have a similar kind of broad view? Nicholas, you want to go?
I'm just trying to think quickly of something relevant. I moved back to Norway 10, 12 years ago. I'm a Norwegian by blood, but spending most of my time in Sweden. And as a Norwegian, growing up in Sweden, moving back, I thought, it's just, moving from Sweden to Norway, it's just same, but different. But however, there's, bigger cultural barriers than that you might think of. And to me, the first thing that struck me was the timing of decision making that was, in a positive sense, moving to Norway, that people are generally more happy to make quicker decisions than coming from Sweden. So, that was at least one experience that I came across quite quickly, that people tend to make quicker decisions here than, at least in comparison to Sweden. That is just my personal opinion. I'm sure there's a lot of other experiences, but that's...
Everyone seems to be nodding here. Why is this the case? Are there any Swedes that want to say something here? Per, do you want to say something? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I just think it's spot on. Having done work on both sides of the border, it's one of the many things that kind of really separates working in Norway or working towards the Norwegian market in comparison to the Swedish, where we're very consensus driven. Let's call it that.
Okay, so this is actually really interesting for me as a complete outsider, right? Because I assume that the consensus culture was generally the case across the Nordic regions, but you're saying that Sweden particularly is consensus driven, but actually Norway maybe less so, and you can make decisions with less people in the room, I guess.
Yeah, it's the same in Finland. We are kind of going quite fast, directly to the point, and making the decision, and so that we can move forward and actually do things.
Yeah, that's actually, yeah. What about Denmark? I think that's totally relevant because, I mean, is Sweden a mega outlier within its own region, or is there a similar sort of consensus-driven way of working in Denmark? I guess, Chris, do you want to say something there?
Yeah, there is. Yeah, we like to joke about our counterparts over the water in Sweden. That's the long negotiation process. I'm going to really stereotype and maybe offend. I really don't. They'll have a meeting, and everyone has to be involved in the decision-making process. Great, there's some nodding heads. And so we joke about that. And so they say in Denmark we're closer to the Norwegians than the Swedes. So it's kind of a separation there. So yeah, it is a common stereotype or perception.
Would it be fair to say there's a continuum then, to say, let's say Sweden, maybe more consensus driven, and then going to the west, it's like Denmark, a little bit less consensus driven, and Norway, pretty much direct. And then I guess if you go to Iceland, maybe they just make decisions by themselves. I don't know. It's like, is there something to do with the spinning of the earth? I have no clue. Okay, this is like fascinating. I actually didn't know this. So this already tells me a few things I need to know if I'm a recruiter or recruiting candidates, let's say, or speaking to a hiring manager in different places. You need to operate differently and understand that the speed of decision making is going to vary over time. I can imagine, for instance, let's say you're collecting a requisition, a job requisition. And there's multiple stakeholders involved. You can anticipate that the investiture of time as a recruiter is going to be longer in Sweden, let's say, than it would be the case in Norway. So that has to be factored into your plan as to how much time you're going to commit to doing the job of recruiting and stuff like this. How very interesting. Okay, let's keep going. I mean, do you want to say something, Kati, in terms of like your understanding of on a broad range, like on the Nordic side, one thing from a complete outsider like me that it would be useful for me to know?
Yeah, I would point out that the kind of how do you interview candidates is in the Nordics very respectful for the candidate, and it's more like an equal conversation rather than the recruiter kind of grilling the candidate. And especially in Finland, it's candidate experience is one of the kind of the main themes at the moment. That how do you improve that, and it really affects to your employer brand.
That's very interesting, and I totally identify with what you're saying from just coming from a London, UK perspective. We were trained to be aggressive to candidates. I don't know whether Danny or Chris, if you can sort of share that experience. But I was trained. Listen, that you got to like mentally break this guy. You got to like break him down and like establish control and authority. That was the training. So I thought, but that you don't do. This is no bueno in anywhere in the Nordics, right? Because candidates will not tolerate it, or it's simply a big taboo to be that aggressive, I guess.
Yeah, you will end up in the news. If you,
right, it's at the scandal level, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Again, that's interesting, folks, because listen, if you're like, even like these days, if we're doing like remote hiring, we're doing like distributed recruiting, etc., the chance of you interacting with a candidate from the Nordic regions is a lot higher now than it was 2 years ago, 3 years or so ago, because suddenly more people are going to be remote hiring, more people, suddenly a person in a country that didn't plan to relocate might suddenly want to think, yeah, sure, I'll work with your business because it's a fully remote business. You then have to think about how you're behaving on interview, because the expectations are going to be different. There needs to be some sort of cultural awareness as to how that is. Okay, we seem to have lost Per there as well. Danny, let's go to you. As a person similar to on Chris's journey, arriving to a new country for the first time, did you catch yourself making a couple of early mistakes that you think, you know what, there's something I've got to learn about the local ways of operating here, and that to help me get on with it? And what was that thing, if that was a lesson you learned?
Yeah, many mistakes. Chris has already touched on the consensus-driven culture. So like failure to involve everyone who you may think to be relevant in the decision-making process, even the team that you're hiring into, involve them as well, because they'll feel very left out. They'll be quite upset if they're not involved.
I didn't know this. What, proactively involve them?
I would say so. It doesn't have to be that everyone interviews the candidate, but I'd say involve them in some way, whether if it's designing the interview process, constructing the interview questions, if there's an informal coffee or a lunch or a meet the team involved in some way. Because if you go making hiring decisions and it's just the recruiter and the hiring manager and the hiring team are not involved, it typically doesn't go down very well. That's been my experience, at least.
Right, very interesting. So let's say sometimes you might have a great relationship with the hiring manager, and they just say, "Hey, Danny, let's work on this job or whatever," and it seems like it's a complete conversation there. But you as a recruiter, if you're smart, you got to think, okay, who else is going to be interacting with the candidates that I put forward? I need to involve them in some way. So in other words, you don't necessarily wait for explicit or all these people, like identified people involved. Like, do you need to proactively suggest, bring them into the conversation?
Yes, I think you do. I don't think that they would come to you. They wouldn't be happy if, they wouldn't be happy if you went ahead with a decision. But I don't think they would proactively come to you. That's part of the consensus-driven culture that Per talked about before. It can take longer to get decisions made, but once they've been made, everything is good because everyone's in alignment, you see.
Yeah, you don't get resistance down the track or the passive aggressiveness sometimes that you can get if, one person feels as if they were inadequately consulted about a decision, and then they'll forever remind you about of that until proven otherwise. Okay, how very interesting. This is already brilliant. We've already got the time of the day thing. We've got the consensus-driven culture. We've got the candidate treatment. Like, we can't be like hierarchical in attitude. What else do you think that a new recruiter coming in needs to know about that is relevant in Nordics specifically, or the particular countries specifically? So Nordics generally and each individual country specifically. Any thoughts on that? I'll throw it open. Go ahead.
I have a comment on that, Hung. I think, at least I speak for my just a Norwegian market, and I think speed is quite important for external recruiter or internal recruiter, and that's basically based upon the market situation, where since I moved here 10-12 years ago, the economy has been booming up and down, but booming in Norway, and the shift in power between the employer and the candidate is basically nowadays. I mean, we have a unemployment rate of 1.6%, which is record low, which means the opportunities for job hunting is extremely good, and I think this is something that we still educate a lot of employees, that we don't have the power anymore, or the exclusivity to sit and wait and match up 2, 3, 4 good candidates. We need to make a lot quicker decisions in order to sign a candidate, because the opportunities out there is just tremendous. And if you don't make quicker decisions, you probably lose the candidate that you want. So that's just a comment from my point of view in Norway. So need for speed.
The need for speed, which I guess the Norway might have a competitive advantage in the sense that perhaps decisions are faster. So I guess that might confront, let's say, a Swedish business that maybe is working, like there's more pressure for them to speed up if they're competing for the same candidate.
Yeah, I can go on that. I generally think that it puts Sweden at a bit of a disadvantage, the speed thing. I also think that in Sweden, people are quite risk averse. Employment law sort of weighs very heavily in favor of the employee. So I'd say companies are quite risk averse around sort of making snap decisions. They don't respond well to pressure, being put under pressure by recruiters, for example, which is something that I think British recruiters have a reputation of doing, telling hiring managers that people have multiple offers and forcing them to sort of make decisions quickly doesn't typically go down very well in Sweden.
Yeah, that's really... How does influencing work in this case then? because if you can't like put the implied threat, which again is very much the British style, right? If you can't like drop that in there, like what do you do? Do we just accept that this is the process and come what may?
I think you have to take a lot more time, certainly, than I did. So when I worked in London, I don't think I took as much time building relationships. It was just a case of, we need this candidate with these skills, go find them. Fine, I do, and they get hired. But in Sweden, I think you really need to spend more time building relationships with hiring managers, with interviewers, with everyone, to understand the decision-making criteria, first of all.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. How do you do that, Danny? Is it a case where you have to, can you be explicit that this is a relationship building conversation, or do you need to sort of find the reasons to interact with them in some way and build trust that way? Per's laughing here. So I'm trying. How direct can you be? I want to be your friend. Like, can you say that? Is that too forward? You can't say this. Per, do you want to answer that one?
Well, it's just my take on it, but as Danny was saying, like to be able to avoid kind of like the threat of losing a candidate when you turn up and turn quite aggressive, go like you need to make a decision. Usually, you're not going to get people on board on that, but if you establish a working relationship, then you can usually come to them when it's actually important. Go like, yeah, we really need to make this decision. So building those relationships are kind of what puts you in the position that you can pull out the threat of make a decision now. I don't know if Danny has another take, but I'd say walking up to a Swedish person going like, yeah, I'm doing this because I want to be friends with you, seldom turns out great. But we do have the miraculous fika that always works.
So you just got to spend. To be honest with you, that's really interesting. Like perhaps the evolution of something like fika is in order to build relationships, right? I mean, it's like so as a recruiter or a new person coming into the organization, like recruiters sometimes over optimize for productivity, right? It's like every single second counts. Everything's like diary's totally maxed out. But actually, what you want to do is to create half an hour, 2 hours, maybe in the afternoon, that's empty. Like there's nothing going in there. And that gives you the reasons to go and interact with people and build those relationships. Now, obviously, my visualization of all of this happening is in an in-person environment. How has the shift to remote changed how relationships get built in Swedish societies specifically, but then Nordic societies generally? Any thoughts on this?
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I've seen quite a sharp upturn in memes, actually using kind of like the digital conversation tools that are applicable, using those to kind of try to build some sort of conversation that goes beyond only this is the task, this is how we're going to approach it, but rather introducing some sort of fun or interpersonal relationships that goes beyond the pure parameters of the work. Then if it's Slack or Teams or just sending text, that doesn't really matter. But for me, at least in my working channels, I've seen quite a sharp uptick during COVID, even from more senior hiring managers and the such.
Yeah, we shouldn't underestimate the memes and the emojis type of vibe. I mean, I've totally changed my mind on these things. I was a very conservative, like old man skeptic. It's like, yeah, I'm never going to send an emoji. What am I, a child? No. But I've realized that actually I read this post and it was like, hey, an emoji is actually like a micro expression in text. Right? Like one thing you see in text is that you can't see the tonality of it. You have to read the sarcasm is hard to read, all this type of stuff. Because in human communication, face to face, you can see the face. You can hear the tonality. You can't do that. Hence the emoji evolved, because then you can stick that in there and that gives it the color and the nuance. So emojis are the way forward in terms of it's sort of introducing those nuances. It's a wonderful thing. I'm basically a convert onto the emojis now. But you're saying this is something that's totally something we should do in any relationship buildings. I think this is actually a challenge university, right? Everyone's shifted to remote, generally speaking. So I think that's really easy for people that you've met before. I've found that working in collaboration with people that I've had an in-person past with is much easier now in remote, right? But with new people I've never met in person, it's like harder to work with them in a remote setting because there's no social capital exchange. So we all need to get better at building relationships in a remote setting. And if it is the case in Scandinavia and Sweden particularly, that relationship building is super important, then I guess we need to be quite active on those remote channels to make sure that those relationships are there. How much of this is personal branding? I mean, are the relationship building always a one-to-one private channel DM, or can you sort of do it in a more public, public Slack channel, let's say, or just to present yourself out a little bit more? Is that an effective strategy in the various countries you live in? Let's go around the clock on this one, because I'll be interested to know whether there's any regional variance on this. Kati, do you want to answer this? How does it work in Finland? If I wanted to build my profile, my social relationships in a remote business, how do I do that?
Yeah, I would also say, kind of underline that it's really important, the hiring manager relationship and the kind of the mutual trust that you have built in order to be a successful recruiter. And I would say that it's an opportunity to kind of build your personal brand and use the communication channels. It can be Slack or like a company's channels, but it could also be LinkedIn. And I quite often get feedback internally from the hiring managers or people about things that I post in LinkedIn. So I have used that strategy for 10 years now, and it's really working quite well. And people can kind of, they get to know you if you also post some personal stuff and can relate to certain things.
And that's really interesting, because that outside in type of marketing strategy, if you like, I think is really effective, because I think you're absolutely right. If you're kind of creating a little bit of a splash on an external platform, there's people in your company that will see that, and generally speaking, they'll feel very positive about it, because you're representing the business in a way, in a way that's getting good engagement and hopefully positive engagement and so on. So that then builds the internal brand as well as the external brand. So very interesting you say. I've got this stereotype, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Forgive me for even holding it in my mind. It may well be completely incorrect. But I have this stereotype that it's actually not a good thing to even think about personal branding in Scandinavia, because it might just be a little bit of like showing off, or a little bit too much of, look at me type of vibe. Is that generally the case? And if so, how do you navigate those two things? So we want to do it because it kind of works, but at the same time, we also don't want to be the person that everyone, like we're breaking some sort of soft cultural taboo and then actually building a negative grit in terms of how people think of us. Firstly, is the stereotype correct? Yes or no? And how do we navigate these two things? Who wants to answer that one?
I'll kick it off. It is an important nuance in Scandinavia, and I certainly speak for Denmark to be very humble and not to be over bragging or speaking of your successes. Within it's got to be within reason. There's a janteloven of not showing off. But personal branding, as you can see with my T-shirt, and very busy on LinkedIn every day. Big advocate for personal branding. It is so beneficial. It's just the message you're putting across has got to be right. So what I'm doing for my clients, and especially I wouldn't say post-COVID, we're still in COVID, but as you were alluding to, when we're more remote, I'm now out in the business, getting out there, sharing the roles, talking about the journey the company are on, what is happening, and the team within my client see that they can see what I'm busy working on. That gets them to think, you know what, I'm going to do a post on that too, or I'll create a post, create some traction, talk about what the IT department doing in one of my clients. And then I share it internally, and they're like, that's a fantastic idea. And they see the results of that, and it encourages them to start using their social media network. So the message you're putting out should be helping others, good messages, the right messages, give, rather than being out there over promoting, overselling. Don't do that. Give information, and that's the positive personal branding.
Yeah, so basically it's all, I think most people who coach personal branding would probably would say this is how you should do it, like plus all the time rather than take. And I think, maybe Scandinavia is more sensitive than many other areas, and more condemnatory, if you like, of people that are, perceived to be trying to shine a light on themselves all the time. Is there a concept of humble bragging in Scandinavia? You know, this term that the Americans have come up with. I think it's actually really good. Where, you know, they post on LinkedIn about some sort of fake trauma they've had, but really it's about how amazing they are to overcome this thing, and it's really about bragging, even though it's like disguised humility. Is that a concept that exists in the countries that we're talking about here?
Never heard about the humble bragging.
Are you serious, Nicholas? You're missing out, man. It's the best entertainment on LinkedIn.
But I'd like to comment on the personal branding. I definitely think it's not about the bragging. I think it's about time that each and every recruiter starts to really market themselves, because it will be a win-win, a positive situation for all parties. Because I think for the past, I don't know how many years, as a candidate or a customer, who am I in our recruiting world? There's so many talented people out there working by themselves or representing big companies, but it's really difficult for everyone to get behind the scenes and understanding, who am I to turn to get the best help possible, both as a candidate or a customer. And if I, as a candidate or a customer, know a lot more about the recruiter, in the specific city or the companies they're recruiting for, the industries, I definitely know who to turn to. And that's something I think it's been missing out there. Just maybe there's something out there that I've missed. But if you, it's interesting that you brought that up. I'm just about to test a little thing. If someone goes into our website, krut.no/my name, Nicholas Lerner, I tried to put together, my professional recruiter profile as a personal branding landing page, just to tell the world a little bit about myself, what kinds of companies that I work with, what kind of placements that I've done. So you get a picture of, okay, is this fellow interesting for me or not to engage with? So I get the message across, and I think that's nothing about bragging. I think just worthwhile everyone.
I think it's very worthwhile, Nicholas. I actually applaud you for it. Although the caveat I would say is that you are like an entrepreneur, right? So that is an unusual person, because I think you kind of need to do this as part of being a business success, so to speak. And I wonder. It's just occurred to me, LinkedIn has like a cover photo. You can do a cover video, which basically does an intro for everybody. I don't think many people have used that overall. So I'd be interested to know how many people overall have actually used it. But you let me know, folks. You're watching this right now on LinkedIn. Have you actually got a video of yourself on your profile? Everyone can do this on mobile, right? And that's an opportunity for you to actually address whoever clicks on your profile. Say, hey, I'm Hung. I do this, and this. Check this out. And you could totally do it. I don't think many people have done it, but I wonder whether the ratio in Scandinavia might be even lower than average, because of this concept of not wanting to, shine the light on yourself in any way. I don't know. That's basically my guess on that.
Yeah, I think that is a great feature on LinkedIn, and it's been on my to-do list, but I always forget it. So now I will do it.
I was gonna say that it sounds to me like a commitment, Caddy. So I would expect that when people check your profile out, like after this show, there needs to be something on there. By the way, I think everyone should do this. It's like totally free. And if you're a recruiter, exactly as Nicholas has said, it actually just helps humanize you a little bit. So if you're emailing someone or you're sending something you're a new person, a stranger to the person you've messaged, they can actually check you out a little bit, and that warms it up a little bit. So there's no reason why not. Okay, let's talk about candidates. So I'm in the business. I've built my relationships internally. It's all great there. I'm actually speaking to candidates from Sweden, from Norway, Denmark, and so on. How do I do that? Is there any different ways in which that needs to happen, or is it like, don't overthink it. Just send the guy an email and follow up after 3 days. Stick him on a drip campaign and hope for the best. Like, what is the best approach to get engagement from candidates in these countries?
Yeah, I can go real quick. I found the best approach has been, like I say, with hiring managers, building relationships. So don't just go in all guns blazing with, exciting opportunity in capital letters, 7 exclamation marks, talk about the job, the tech stack, and the salary, and expect them to be open to a chat, because they're typically not. So I found that the softer approach works a lot better. Hey, Hung, I noticed you've been working over at so-and-so for so many years with this technology or what have you. I would love to find out more about you, to see if what we're doing may interest you, so we can have a really quick informal chat to talk about that. That's how the approach.
Did you all hear that, folks? I thought that was a really a succinct sort of description as you can make it in terms of how to do an outreach. I think that would work in any kind of cultural context, but particularly in Scandinavia, which is essentially centering the candidate, right? Centering the candidate in the conversation rather than, hey, the job is amazing, feature like benefits selling the job, and this person obviously needs to apply. No, it's about, look, I'm going to find out about what your motivations are, what drives you, so that, we can figure out whether in future there might be an opportunity that is worth bringing to your attention. That's going to be a much more powerful way. We should all apply that irrespective of where you are location-wise, folks. Okay, thoughts on candidates, Kati? Are Finnish candidates any different in your experience? Like, how do we reach out to those folks?
Yeah, I've been mostly most of my career hiring the IT and tech experts. So I think there was one comment about the if people are like introvert, like mostly, but I would say that the kind of the winning approach to candidates in Finland and I think in all Nordic countries is that you treat them as your equal and really be respectful and kind of in that way. I think that is and that needs to be during the overall process, and of course, like if you are if you give a professional feeling from from the first touch, that's a really good thing, and it can be that the people will remember you, like and come back to you if you gave this like a good first impression and were not like overselling the job, but rather than kind of also showing that you are a recruiter who appreciates people as a person and their kind of own pace, how they want to proceed.
Can I ask a question to you, Kati, but also to everyone here? How is the recruiting profession perceived in the respective countries that you're currently working in? Like in the UK, for instance, it's very poorly perceived. It's like, oh my God, a recruiter. Is it the same? Do we have to negotiate the same degree of antipathy if I was in Sweden or in Finland or Norway or whatnot?
I'd say that it has gone to a better way during the past years, because the kind of the competition of talent is so fierce that if you are a good recruiter, you are really appreciated. But I think that also depends on the company who you work with, and people might have kind of assumptions of you as a person before they meet you. So you also need to kind of win people over, also the hiring managers. And
oh, we've lost Nicholas. That's all right. This is the nature of Brainfood Live, folks. It's a nutritional a live stream. People don't always make it to the end, but we'll see if we can see if Nicholas can come back in a bit. All right, listen, this might actually be a good natural break, folks, because we always do this at every show, because Brainfood Live is a 1-hour live stream. We have to come off air, but what we want to do is to start a conversation, never to stop the conversation. So if you're interested in this topic, how to hire in the Nordics, and you want to continue this conversation with other people, now is the time to take your LinkedIn profile link and stick it into the chat stream on Crowdcast and stick it into the comment thread on LinkedIn, and then make sure you connect with everyone else who has done that. Everyone who's watching this show right now is interested in this topic. You might be living in Scandinavia. You might be moving to Scandinavia. You might be looking to recruit people in the Nordics. You might be doing all of these things, or you might just be curious about how things sort of might be slightly different in places you're not aware of. Please do use this opportunity to build your network with other people that are also interested in this. And then at least you can go ahead and carry on that conversation when we have to go off air. Okay, cool. We see a few links going in there. That's excellent. I think, my mission is just make everyone networks a bit denser. I think that's a good thing. Okay, let's talk about basic stuff like faux pas. Like what are faux pas that you can imagine that other people might not know? I'm thinking, again, stereotypically, let's say you go to Portugal, for instance. Timekeeping, time works differently if you're in Portugal compared to Germany, for instance. Classic example. I remember a good friend of mine, Pedro, he was actually outraged that the German buses were running on time because he missed his bus. Because he was operating in Portuguese mode. He was totally outraged. And I was like, yeah, man, you're in a different place. Small things like that. Look, what about punctuality? Is it important to be on time in Denmark, in Sweden, in Finland? Is it acceptable to roll in half an hour, 5 minutes late? Is that no bueno? If I'm on Zoom, I've trained myself to be minimum 60 seconds or 1 minute before I'm live, I'm staring at a blank screen because I'm waiting for people to turn up, right? Is that what you should do if I'm interacting with someone in Scandinavia, in Nordics, should I say?
Absolutely. I would say, punctuality is different for different people, but being late and not giving notice is like a social faux pas. You just don't. And then it's fine as long as you get in touch, because things happen. There's a myriad of reasons why it's okay to be late, but being late and not letting the other person know, that quite quickly gives you some negative points.
Yeah. So punctuality, clearly very important. And by the way, that's just professionalism also. But we understand that the priorities are slightly different in different places, where it is more acceptable, more forgivable sometimes it's just like a soft line rather than a hard line in certain sort of spaces. Okay, cool. Let's move on to think about where you think that the local countries might be impeded by certain things that are annoying in the cultural practice. That we've already talked about. Maybe in Sweden, there's a little bit of consensus, which we all kind of think is positive in the sense people should have input and their opinions are valued. However, that can often slow things down. And sometimes you do need to have a little bit more acceleration if the need is must. Are there any other things that you could say that, this is part of how it works here, but we should probably try and improve it? Any thoughts on this? Well, we can go around, but hands up if you've got an opinion that you want to share. Go ahead, Nicholas.
One maybe interesting point, at least from my, again, personal opinion and experience with the kind of types of customers and candidates, is trying to be as relevant and spot on as possible, at least speaking with customers but candidates, because the type of candidates, at least where we are working with, get quite a few emails and LinkedIn notes, weekly or bi-weekly. So being very relevant, because what I experienced maybe more the past few years is that people are checking you. People are checking you out. Your LinkedIn profile, your whatever it might be, to check you out. they want to know about you sometimes before they answer you. So being very, again, humble, but yet very relevant in the way you engage in a early conversation, I think it's quite critical, at least from my experience in Norway. Maybe I don't know if anyone agrees or disagrees or anything that's you've noticed.
I'll chime in, and I wouldn't say whether it's Nordic specific, but it is just the whole candidate experience. It is treating someone as an equal. Candidate experience has to be absolutely on point. We're in a different market times where there's a lack of candidates, more roles than candidates. So the exchange has to be on point every single time, personalized when you're reaching out. Come with, read their profile and actually get their interest, what's in it for them. And then book a time to speak to them. And that's something I came from the UK. You just get phone calls and like, I've got a job for you, or hey, when are you free and let's talk. It's like, oh, hang on, what is it about? And let's book it in my diary. So it's quite more process driven and just very respectful of someone's time. Before I can expect a Dane to give me their time and sit with me for 30 minutes, what's in it for them? I'm sure this should be just the go-to standard for like anywhere, but I'm certainly speaking from my experience here in Denmark.
Yeah, I mean, we're all, at the end of the day, one thing I'm getting from all of this is that obviously we're all human beings, and there's some basic sort of stuff like the respect. Show me a culture that embraces lack of respect, right? So everyone has this, but in terms of how it's actually expressed or manifested or experienced is different. And we're looking for these signals as to whether sometimes you can inadvertently communicate disrespect and you might not actually know, or you didn't intend it. So I think this is like so valuable for everyone listening that they can get some of this experience out. Quick question, actually, one thing I forgot to mention was, how does negotiation work in the respective countries you're operating in? In some cultures, I'm thinking about making offers, for instance. Like, do you talk about salary up front? Is it like very clear? Hey, listen, can you say to someone on the first call, hey, listen, what salary are you looking for? Like, when do we talk about stuff like that? Sometimes money can be one of those topics that is very different in different cultures. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, as we've spoken about beforehand in terms of respecting the candidate's work-life balance, another part of that is kind of respecting personal boundaries and being really attentive to areas of discussion where they're not comfortable to go. So the issue of salary is something that is really, at least from my point of view, really critical in terms of getting a feel for that upfront, making sure that you don't waste anybody involved's time and making sure that you're aligned. But that said, there are circumstances where that is just not something that's conducted to either the candidate experience or the hiring experience as a whole, both from the companies and the candidates' point of view. But what I've experienced is that there's a really big difference in terms of, are we talking about Stockholm, Gothenburg, Malmö in Sweden, or talking about cities outside of the larger metropolitan areas? There's a big difference there. And also there's a big difference between different areas of competence. Like in Stockholm, on the tech side, people are so used to be approached by recruiters. So the salary issue is something that's really easy to take, even in first call, making sure that you're aligned. If you're trying to hire managers out in rural, I don't know, Umeå, one city, that can really ruin the conversation you're going to have with the candidate moving forward. So it's really situational.
That's really, really important insight. And I'm really pleased you brought that up, because obviously the metropolitan spaces, they have their own culture often, and there's often a very large cultural gap between cities in the same country, because of the operations and the lifestyle living in a big city is different from a smaller city. So basically what you're saying, if I can sum up, you can essentially be a little bit more upfront in a metropolitan space compared to a more regional place, where you've got to just be a bit more careful and sensitive that you're not intruding on what could be private or what be perceived to be private information. I guess that might work. That may also be the case in like negotiating with suppliers, doesn't it? I mean, like when do you talk about money? I mean, is that something that's right up front as well, or is that in the middle, or is it at the end of the thing, or do we just like kind of never talk about it and like somehow get to the contract? Any thoughts on this? The folks who worked as a supplier of services, how do you talk about the cost?
I had 2 conversations today, and we covered the cost in our very first conversation. We don't want to waste each other's time. What are you looking for? What are my services? Let's get down to the pricing. Is it feasible before we go to the next stage? So absolutely, for me.
That's okay to do. Well, I'm glad to hear it, because there's another thing that's important there, which is obviously not to exhaust people's energies when the budget isn't there. I mean, the Brits are actually quite bad at that. At a local level, it's like it's embarrassing to talk about how much it is, and people are reluctant to volunteer the number. And then you take it all the way to the end, and it's like, oh, shit, it's this. So yeah, we could all probably get better at it. Okay, cool. Listen, we're coming to the end of the show. I want to just give the audience some opportunity to ask questions. People might have asked questions in the chat. I'm going to try and get to them. However, if you're on Crowdcast, try and use the ask a question feature, because that makes it easier for us to go and look at it down there, rather than hunt through what is now quite a long chat stream. If you're on LinkedIn, fire in your questions. I've got my phone here. I'm going to try and look through those as well. I want to go around to everyone and ask you all to give like one piece of advice to, let's say, the persona is going to be a young person who is a recruiter that's relocating to your country, and they've never recruited there in that country before. What would you advise them to do? What's your advice? Let's go to you first, Christian. Denmark, give us some advice for this young person.
Part 1 is to listen to this cast here, so that's a good check. Of course, yes, of course. And so, day 1, week 1, I'll just be shadowing them and talking through the nuances and the things that I experienced. I've got it documented as well within our company, but understanding the process and the cultural nuances and how to do things, the things we discussed earlier, how to personalize messages, respecting time, don't just be a salesperson and call, understanding respect of time, work hours, the list goes on.
Okay, cool. I was about to ask, what about the language? I mean, obviously, the Nordics are very famously very, very strong with multiple languages. I think on average, I think most people in the Nordic region can speak at least 3 at high fluency. Most people coming in probably just have English or whatever. What is the premium on being able to speak Danish, Swedish, Finnish, or Norwegian or whatnot? I mean, is that something that is everyone's going to say it's worth doing, but how important would it be in your opinion?
Yeah, my experience is that well, for example, in Finland, you can manage with English as a recruiter, because people are very skilled in English in general. But I would say that maybe in Sweden, it's more it's a bigger advantage if you can have the conversations in Swedish rather than English. So I'd say, comparing these 2 countries, that in Sweden it's more important to know the local language.
Yeah, I think this is going to be one of the big challenges for anybody moving there in a paradoxical sense. I think it's very similar to, let's say, the Netherlands, because the English language standard is so high locally that it's very basically a foreigner is never forced to immerse, which is the best way to try and learn a language. Anyway, let's keep going. A bit of advice, Kati, for a person deciding, okay, I'm moving to Finland. I want to recruit there. What's one thing that you would say? One thing they need to know.
I would say that the recruiters in Finland are really open for new connections and for the talent acquisition community. So I would advise this person to connect with the local colleagues and approach them using LinkedIn, for example.
Yeah, that's a great tip, folks. Like always, in country network, this is what we've been trying to do. The LinkedIn connections right there, but make sure you do that. In fact, you should probably do that even before you relocate, right? I mean, you can even say, "Hey, I'm moving. Can we have a chat?" No, nothing wrong with that. Okay, Nicholas, I'm moving to Oslo, man. What do I need to know?
You go out and have a beer with me, and I will tell you everything about it. No, honestly, I think the social approach could be very helpful. Honestly, if you get to know some people, go out and have a drink, get to know them. Park the professional side, and that will come anyway. But understand what is there for me to understand about the Norwegian culture. What happens in Norway? What happens in Bergen? Or we are 5 million plus people. It's a small country. What happens in the outskirts of Oslo, 5 kilometers out? Just get to know people. How do they react, respond? How should I treat people? So get social.
That's it. It's almost like we take away the professional lens, just immerse yourself into the life there and just interact with the local community. That's going to do a lot more than all of the stuff that we're talking about from a theoretical point of view. Okay, cool. Go to you, Pev, real quick. Give us one bit of advice. I'm moving to Sweden. What do I need to know?
All the good tips are taken. No, but so like as Karim alluded to earlier, I think it can be really important to try to get a grasp of the language, and we Swedes are slightly proud of constantly saying that we don't have a Swedish culture, but the Swedish culture is full of like little do's and don'ts that are never really documented or easy to understand if you don't do what Niklas said and actually find a group and start socializing, and you quite quickly learn that you do not break the queue and you don't speak on the bus and so on and so forth.
You don't speak on the bus? I mean, what kind of crazy people are you?
You do not, Hang. You do not.
I've got to be honest, the only people that speak on public transport are Americans. Our American friends are conspicuous for doing that, and it just alarms everybody. It's like a frightening thing. Okay, Danny, I'll leave it to you at the end. Give us one tip the people need to know when they're moving to Sweden, maybe from the UK to Sweden. That's a very well-worn path. How would you advise young Danny if you could have a chat with that chap?
Lower the intensity, chill out a bit. Like there isn't this culture of long working hours. Like someone's job or career probably isn't number one. It's family. It's a life outside of work. Don't be pushing people to go to meetups, conferences, be pushing hiring managers to meet candidates in the evenings and stuff. Don't do that. Just play the long game, basically.
Perfect. I love it. Chill out, folks. Okay, listen, I haven't forgotten all the questions. We're going to go to them real quick, okay? So this one is from Navidita. What about in comparison? Oh, sorry, I missed the context there. I think we might have answered that, hopefully. Okay, does headhunting work on passive candidates? Calling people at work, or will that be counterproductive? Quick one, yes, no. In Denmark, do I call people at work? No, it doesn't work, Navita. Okay, ATS most widely used in Scandinavia. I can tell you, it's Team Taylor, isn't it? Team Taylor. Yeah, that's it. Very good product. They were like unanimously voted as they're the only ATS on the "What Do You Want" survey that I conducted for, I think, 2,000 recruiters, 2,500 recruiters. They're the only ones that unanimously got positive, but all of the ones that voted were in Scandinavia. So they need to expand to different, if they've got such a good product, they need to expand, obviously, into Europe. Okay, that's it, folks. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed the virtual tour. Definitely every country deserved its own sort of session. Maybe we'll break that down in future as well. Make sure you follow the channel if you like this kind of conversational chat. By the way, I will actually be in Sweden next week, fingers crossed. I'm going to be in Gothenburg for 3 days. So if you're in Gothenburg and you want to hang out and drink beers on someone else's money, come and get in touch with me because I think I have somebody's budget. Otherwise, what's happening next week? Next week, all right, Brainfood Bake Fresh, Monday, 12:30 UK time. If you want to review the newsletter with us and talk about that, sign up for that show. On Friday, we're going to be talking about how to do layoffs in a more ethical and efficient manner. So if you're in a situation where your company is under stress, or you see around the corner that actually, holy crap, things might be happening, what can you do to make sure you have an ethical and efficient process with your candidates and with the employees that you're dealing with, and maybe even design something that would be suitable for yourself if unfortunately you find yourself in that boat. So make sure you sign up for that if you're interested. Okay, that's about it. Thank you to our guest, Christian Payne. Thank you for your amazing contribution. Kati Kitty, Danny, Per, and Nicholas, thank you so much for your time. Please enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. We'll see you again soon, folks.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Cheers.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Wasn't that great, everybody? Thought that was great. I do like the split so that we can have like full time to properly speak about all of this. Really good. Okay, I'll see you soon. Have a good weekend, everybody.